So I'll start. I have a little bit of information to share with you all about youth on boards and the connection between tonight's professional development and what we're doing right as the larger picture. So I'm going to share my screen. As I mentioned, Youth on Boards was independently, it was a project that started out Youth on Boards Climate Action. It was part of I think it was called Our Climate Common was the name of the organization, and last year became a project of TCI because of the mission alignment with what Youth on Board is doing with empowerment of young climate activist voices and what TCI does. So TCI believes that youth are going to be the drivers of solving the global climate crisis. Our goal is to empower youth to be change makers and to embrace their power that they have when it comes to policy. Angie mentioned policy earlier, and thinking about board governance as a form of policy work because you're setting policy and strategy for organizations, and thinking about boards such as school boards, municipal boards, and how do we broaden this idea of like what policy is and what board leadership is. And our ultimate goal is to educate, empower, and activate 10 million youth by the year 2025. And Youth on Boards is one branch of how we're doing that. So I want to give you just a little bit more information about Youth on Boards at TCI. This is a brand new program for us. Bethany Humphrey, who was previously leading the program, started with us late fall. We officially launched in January. So basically what we do is we're looking to work with young people under the age of 30 or 30 and under to empower them to serve as members, voting members on boards, and to advance climate solutions through their action on municipal boards, school boards, private sector, public sector, nonprofit boards. And Youth on Boards provides training, professional development, education to young folks. And we do consulting and working with governing boards to be ready to host youth and to create an empowering experience for the young folks on the board. We're doing this because we believe that this is really an act of social justice and social equity. So we believe that young voices are part of a marginalized group that typically haven't had a seat at the table when it comes to discussions around climate change. So we want to work to bring more youth to the table. I think it was last year for the S&P 500. The average age of a board member on a private sector board was 64. The average age of a first-time board member was 58. So there's tons of room for younger voices to be at the table and to talk about what matters to your generation. So that is why we talk about educate, empower, and activate youth. This is one way that we can take action in bringing youth voices to different organizations and sectors that they might not have been in previously. So today we're doing this little kickoff, this really fun Q&A panel. What's coming next? We're still building out this program and what it's going to look like as far as future placement of youth on boards. So the best thing is after this, I'm going to send an email to everyone saying, hey, thanks so much. Here's the video. If you have any questions, let me know. And so if you want to find out more about potentially being placed on a board or getting training, let me know, say yes, and you'll receive email notifications. We have a fall PD series on Zoom set up. So these will be, virtual. Anyone can attend from anywhere. We don't have dates yet because I'm actually going to set those around the folks that respond to me and that are interested. But in September, it's going to be the basics of board membership. What do you need to know about how boards are selected, the role they play in an organization, talk about their role in setting strategy and how they relate to staff members. And then in October, we have a great training that an accountant put together for us about how to understand financials of an organization. If you get a financial report, how to read that and understand the role that the board has in approving budgets and helping set financial direction for the organization. So so just let me know if you're interested in going further with this after tonight's session. So will you give us your bio overview?
Sure. So hi everyone, Samantha Salazar. I am based here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was working as a TCI New Mexico fellow 2 years ago. And during that time, I was also working at the Center for Civic Policy. I actually just left that nonprofit. Now I am working for Pacific Northwest National Labs. But I am working for two boards currently, the Albuquerque Energy Council Board and the New Mexico Conservation Alliance Board. So this is really great because it is like there isn't a lot of young people on those boards. I am literally the youngest person on that board. So it's really great that you're having this because it is really important to have young voices.
Lydia and Samantha, thank you both so much for being here tonight. So I have a few questions prepared, but I definitely want this to feel more like a conversation. So folks that are here tonight, if you have questions that come up, if you want to raise a hand on Zoom or drop it in the chat, I'll be monitoring the chat, and there will be more formal time at the end as well for Q&A after the prepared questions. Please feel free to chime in. But I guess I want to start out. I would just love to hear from both of you the pathway that you took to joining a board.
I can go first. So for Climate Work Maine, it didn't have a name when I started with it. It started as a series of conversations, and the path, how I got involved in this is I started saying yes to things. So I had been working for group for a long time, and I got asked to present on a series of webinars. So I said yes to that, presented on those webinars, got asked to participate in something else, said yes to that. And even though it took away a little bit of maybe my focus from my day job, and I took some time out of my schedule and my life, I began to volunteer in this capacity by saying yes to these opportunities to present my expertise. And what that meant was that I increased my networking around this. And we got together with the person who had this founding idea for Climate Work Maine. Eventually, when he was forming the organization, started asking me what I thought of it. And so it was probably from the initial time we had the conversations to when actually Climate Work Maine founded and I became an official board member. That was 2 years of conversations. So 2 years of volunteering my time and my thoughts towards what this organization should do without a title, without anything in it for myself, without, just me hoping to steer this organization in a way that I thought would make it successful. So that is how I joined Climate Work Maine. It was honestly just through 2 years of listening to conversations, listening to people's ideas, and saying yes to any opportunity I was given to discuss this idea at this organization. And to be honest, my end goal was not to end up on the board. I was actually hoping to not be on the board because it had taken quite a lot of my time. But then when I got asked to join the board, I couldn't possibly say no because at that point it was entirely my baby and I cared about it and wanted to see it succeed. But I would say that the initial beginning was just saying yes to so many opportunities that came up locally and networking to begin to meet the people who were trying to make things happen within the state and my geography.
I'll jump in now. So I'll start with the New Mexico Conservation Alliance. So I'm going to preface that LinkedIn is a really great networking tool. And if you don't have one, make one right now. And to this day, I just reach out to people. I will cold call them, not cold call, but cold message them. I don't care if you are the director of some high nonprofit. I'll just, see if they respond back to me. But with New Mexico Conservation Alliance, I was messaged by Marco, who's the president of the board at that time, and he's 26, I'm 25, and he was like, hey, looked at your resume on LinkedIn, it looks really great, I really want to collaborate with you. So that was kind of out of the ordinary circumstance, but it is a way to help get you kind of known in the climate space. So that's definitely a tool that I would use. And from there, the work that New Mexico Conservation Alliance does is work with youth to get them into internships and jobs that are climate and water based. And I thought that was super important because, again, I wish I would have had resources like that during my time trying to find jobs in climate work. So I've been working with them, and it's been really great trying to get, funding wherever we can. The budget is really important. That's something I wish I would have had because did not know anything about budget related stuff and kind of had to just learn on my own. With Albuquerque Energy Council, I applied through the city of Albuquerque, and your city probably has governing boards of different kinds like water, energy. So I applied thinking, they're not going to hire me. I'm young. I don't have that much experience, but, I was chosen by the mayor, which I was really ecstatic about. And I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow, and I've learned so much. So don't think because you're young, you don't have the experience. I would say just go for it and say yes to those opportunities. Just like Lydia said, just say yes and just go for it. The worst that's going to happen is you don't get selected, then just apply again.
So I hear sort of a mixture of like, just say yes to opportunities, but also then it sounds like Sam's experience was having or needing to be very proactive, which, one of the things Youth on Boards is trying to do is to make it more accessible to folks that are interested in those opportunities and trying to remove some of the traditional barriers for folks like Sam that are out there trying to find leadership roles in that capacity. So I appreciate both of those stories. So, sorry, Lydia, you look like you were going to say something. Or
I was just going to say what I should have said, because I realized as I was talking, and as Samantha, as you were talking, is that it's easy to say yes when you've been presented with the opportunities. But as Samantha said, sometimes you have to go out and seek the opportunities for yourself. And one of the things that I would emphasize that I did is not just opportunities, it's also the little things. Like if there's a networking event that's being hosted in your city, that's like, hey, come grab, we have a program in Portland, Maine, where I'm based called Green Dreams, which every month they have a nonprofit fundraiser where you go and you pay a little bit and you support a nonprofit. I think it's $3 to go or something. So we're talking very little to support these nonprofits. But events like that, just networking events in your city, or go to that showing of that movie that's free, that's at your university or at your local, community center. So saying yes to those opportunities as well, not just to the opportunities asking you for something, but the opportunities to learn from others as well. So that's where I went wrong in my first answer, or missed a piece in my first answer.
Yeah, I think, and what you're both sort of saying, it's typically been a networking game, right? It's about having the right contacts and making yourself known within networks. So that's an interesting point. So I'd love to hear from both of you, and Lydia, you can maybe tell both about your nonprofit board and then board where you work, but the boards that you all are familiar with, when you think about the structure of the organization, or the structure of what they're overseeing, how does the board fit into the structure of that organization?
Happy to go first. So at a for-profit organization, the board is not meant to manage the organization. So we have that our CEO is a part of the board, but the board members are not involved in the day-to-day operations of the organization. We meet with them on a quarterly basis. They're divided into the full board, and plus we have committees. We have an audit committee, governance, human capital, regulatory compliance, risk and finance. And those committees oversee specific topics, but they're not necessarily approving things very often. They are not taking action. They are sitting in a room and listening and giving feedback and asking questions when needed. And it's management's job, meaning our CEO and everyone who actually works for the company on a regular basis. It's our job to go do the work. And it's our job to prepare the work to show them. We're telling them what we want them to know, and they're giving us their direction as the industry experts for us to take forward. Versus in a nonprofit board, the board members are also the people doing the work a lot of the time. So for Climate Work Maine, for instance, We have one executive director, so we have one full-time employee, and then we have a small contract with one other person. So technically we have about 1.2 full-time employees, and that's it. So the board, as a volunteer board, also we act as that steering agency, but we also are the people who do the work. So when the executive director says, I need help setting up chairs, that's the board. When the executive director says, I need help finding new members, that's the board. And so that's a large difference, is the roles that the board plays, is we both have to put on our strategy hats as well as our work gloves at the same time in the not-for-profit board versus for-profit board. They are just fiving us for the most part.
I'll jump in. So with New Mexico, the Albuquerque Energy Board, it's kind of like giving feedback to the mayor. So we don't, it's meant to guide, and we're more seen as like subject matter experts. So we're not directly involved as well on the day-to-day basis. We're more so as what we think would be best for the city in terms of energy development. And none of it's taken like, everything has to be voted on. So although we have a say, it's not the final say. And then with nonprofit, we're more directly involved in what we want to be seen and done within that organization.
Right. Thank you all so much for like sort of highlighting, contrasting, and comparing the differences. So we talk a lot about this idea of sustainability or impact when it comes to organization. And I'm just curious, in your experience, what role the boards that you're familiar with or that you work on, what role do they play in this idea of sustainability? Like, what are we actually doing when we say like a board is making decisions around sustainability or impact?
So I went first all the other time. Samantha, do you want to go first this time? Switch it up.
Sure, yeah. So in terms of New Mexico Conservation Alliance, our focus really is getting people into this type of work, getting them into sustainability, climate-related work, water conservation, and it's focused mostly on youth that don't really have those opportunities in rural New Mexico versus like the big city like Albuquerque and Santa Fe. So that is like our main focus, is getting those opportunities. And that's how it's directly related to sustainability, because we get more people involved when they're young. They're going to build themselves up to, directors, assistant directors. And, that's basically the goal, is to have more people in leadership that care about climate related topics. And then with Albuquerque Energy, we really focus on what we can do to make Albuquerque more sustainable for energy, especially if, majority of the housing is built in the 1930s. How can we make it more sustainable for families that they're not paying tons of money? So working on those types of issues is how I would correlate it to sustainability.
So I'll be a little bit boring and just read straight from one of our governance documents for a second here, and then I'll explain a little bit more. But so within our, we have public committee charters for all of our board of directors committees, and the one that primarily oversees our corporate sustainability efforts is our governance committee. All of the other committees have a role to play in reviewing environmental, social, and governance topics when they come up and are relevant to that specific committee. But the governance committee is responsible for overseeing and monitoring the effectiveness of the company's sustainability program, including strategy and key initiatives concerning sustainability matters, providing guidance to the board, so that's the broader board, other committees and management as appropriate concerning sustainability risks and opportunities, and reviewing annually the company's impact and sustainability report. So that's a lot, but what that primarily means is that it's the board's responsibility to make sure that our corporate sustainability program sets us up well for the long term, in consideration of environmental, social, and governance factors. And when we talk about corporate sustainability, generally when corporations talk about corporate sustainability, we don't just focus on environmental sustainability. We're not just talking about climate change. We're talking about every material, social, or environmental impact that either we can have on the communities that we operate in, and that the world around us can have on us as well. So you often see within corporate sustainability inclusion of topics such as, compliance and ethics, or community giving and philanthropy, or inclusion and diversity as well. So there's a really broad array of topics that we include in that. And when it comes down to each company, it's a little bit different per company depending on where they might have the biggest impact. So for instance, I'm a part of a financial institution. So one of the biggest impacts we can have is through our products and our services. Like, how are we thinking about financial inclusion? And so that's an emphasis that your local grocery store, when they're thinking about sustainability, might not have. So it's a little bit different per company, but overall, it's the consideration of all how environmental and social and governance factors impact a company in the long term. Group's 175 years old. How do we make sure it's still running 175 years from today as well, in worlds where we are much more impacted by the world we operate in because we're so much larger?
It's awesome. Thank you both. So in Youth on Board, we talk about board service as a kind of community service, as a form of giving back and civic engagement. So there are many, many ways that people are engaged in their community, in the political landscape where they are, or making the world a better place. For you all, why were you drawn to, and I know, Lydia, it sounds like you were drawn in, but what is it about this kind of service that drew you to board leadership? Like, as a form of service? Why did you choose board leadership?
So I really said yes to both opportunities because for the nonprofit with New Mexico Conservation Alliance, I believed in the mission. And I personally, I wish I would have had more opportunities within the climate spaces when I was younger to get involved. I grew up in a rural area in New Mexico, and wish I would have had more opportunities like that. And then with the Albuquerque Energy Council, my background is in energy policy, and I thought would be a really great way to kind of learn about what's happening within my own community and how I can use my skills to help benefit them.
I don't want to make it sound like I was too unwilling and that I was dragged in, but what I would say is that it's really about how you can have the biggest change with the least amount of time devoted to it. So I can have a board meeting once a quarter, and we can steer the direction of what an organization is going to do for the next 3 months after that. And it's the biggest way to use my expertise that I have developed through my career, or your education, or just your personal reading, in order to make changes. And so that's where I've found it the most appealing, is that it is that place where you can kind of help others along a path that you yourself are also trying to journey along. Versus, there's a lot of really great climate focused nonprofits out there. And I think you can have a large impact on a small nonprofit. And if you were to join up with one of the bigger nonprofits, your voice might not be as readily heard. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Those organizations are worth devoting your time to as well. But when you feel very passionately about a topic or a specific geography, or about a specific, something really niche, it's important to get your voice as loud as possible. I guess that's where I would end it.
I think a few times we've touched on this idea of having your voice heard. It's a way at TCI, we sort of, the 3 pillars: educate, empower, and activate. And for us, the empower is having your story told, or sharing in the conversation. So I really appreciate y'all sort of sharing that board leadership is a way to, have your voice heard and have a seat at the table and be part of the conversation. I love that. So what do you all think are some of the top skills that would be the most helpful to someone who's interested in board service?
I think, okay, so some of the skills, I would say just be confident in yourself. I feel like there's a lot of imposter syndrome when you're young and you're like, I shouldn't be here, that these people have so much more experience than me. I would say just be confident, and not everyone knows everything, even when you do have years of experience. And I would use your youth as a way to be like, I'm learning so many new things that are happening out there. Um, and then I would say just connecting with people is would be a is another thing.
I think you nailed it there. The only thing that I would maybe add is preparation. So I think the biggest thing is that it's sometimes intimidating when you get board materials. If you're on a board for the first time, if you're going to a meeting, do your research, read about all the people ahead of time, look them up on LinkedIn, read all the materials and form your questions ahead of time. And you'd be surprised how much, to Samantha's point, how much that makes you feel. It gets rid of the imposter syndrome because you've already done your homework. You already know what's happening. You've already done the research. So I'd say that's one thing is that spend the time beforehand to feel comfortable with the subject for yourself, and then get that all in line before you have these meetings that you might feel a little bit more pressure for. And then I think the second thing is really questioning everything. I find that some of the most effective leadership is I had a mentor once who called it the 7 whys, is that you ask why 7 times. And so when somebody, and not just to, to yourself as well as to anybody else, when you're thinking through a problem and how you want to solve it, that you should at least be asking yourself why 7 times during any project. And identifying the why can really help you as an individual crisp up your messaging when you go to a board and provide feedback. Being able to have your whys solid and having that questioning already done helps you as well as helps others to make sure that their arguments or their positioning is solid as well. So those would be my 2: questioning everything and preparing well beforehand.
I 100% agree with knowing your stuff as well. Definitely go into the board knowing who everyone is, what their background is. You can look it all up. And then whatever topic, they usually send around like an agenda prior to every board meeting. So do your homework, and that way you do come up with those questions.
It's interesting you all bringing up imposter syndrome because wheels spinning right now as you say this. I think maybe something YOB could address from both ends. Both, if you're a board hosting a younger board member, what do you do to make them feel valued and included, and like they have something worthy to that they bring to the table? And then for a young person, what do we do to help young people feel that they belong, that they deserve to be in that seat, and sort of help them fight imposter syndrome? So I appreciate y'all bringing that up. I have one final question that I had prepared, which would be, what has so far been your greatest challenge as a board member? And then what's been the best part for you? So it's a 2-parter.
The greatest challenge has been that when you have a very small nonprofit board with a very small budget and a very small staff, there's a lot of chicken and egg. We need better programs to attract more members, and we need more members to bring in more money to build better programs. And so you kind of end up in some circular paths. And so that's been a real challenge for us as a board, is to identify, because for each business, they see different opportunities and different programs is where we should spend our time and our money. And so trying to figure out what that looks like and what that financial model is, as I'm sure you'll get into in later on in the fall, but trying to figure out what that financial model looks like has been a real challenge for a nonprofit board that is by business for business. We can't really rely on large grants because we're just not as competitive when we're a business community. And so, which is rightfully so. So it's kind of reworking that modeling, and that financial modeling and that program modeling has been a real challenge for us. And I think that we're getting closer every day, which is really exciting. And then was the second question, greatest joy, I believe. Okay, so I love joy and delight as just a concept in general. I think it's something we should spend a lot of time on as individuals. And in particular, I would say that I find joy and delight in meeting so many people who care so deeply about these topics. I work all day. Within Unum Group, I am a small team. So I work all day kind of in a little bit of an island. Not that the overall Unum Group doesn't care, but I am one of the few people that's dedicated solely to corporate sustainability. So when you're part of a board or that sort of organization, there's so much joy in meeting other people who you realize could opine on the same topics as you for as many hours as you could without getting sick of it. So the individuals who make up these communities are truly fantastic people across the field that I've seen. I haven't met any person that has been anything less than an absolute delight. So
For me, I think the biggest challenge is just getting everyone together, both on the government side, but then also on the nonprofit side. Everyone is working their full-time jobs, and then they're giving their time as a board member as volunteerism. And so trying to find a schedule where we can all meet and finally come together and hash out a lot of these plans, I think is the biggest challenge. And then also the budget. Budget is always limiting because, you might have these great ideas, but then at the end of the day, financial person is going to be like, well, I can't do that because we don't have enough of the funds. So those are the two biggest hurdles always. For me. And then I guess the best thing, meeting the people is really great. Just networking is really awesome. You get to meet a lot of really different types of people. And then the problem solving aspect, I think, is something I really enjoy, trying to figure out how are we going to do, these different things in these different areas, and who do we need to reach out to. So that's something I really enjoy.
So those are the ends of the questions that I had. I want to open it up now for the last few minutes for questions from audience members. And especially if anyone here is interested in board leadership, this is a great time to ask about that process, or, great things to know before you get into that. So you can either just unmute and ask your question, or if you want to drop it in the chat, we can read it out of the chat as well.
Yeah, I kind of had a question. I know at the beginning we kind of discussed how the typical age of a board member is like 65 or something. And I was wondering, have you faced any adversity from your peers on these boards, given that you're at such a young age? And how have you worked to address that and work with it instead of just letting it ruin your day,
my answer is, I think, maybe optimistic, is that I haven't faced adversity in that. I think that I don't know if I can consider myself fully young anymore. But I would say I'm still probably one of the young, I want to say I'm the youngest person on the nonprofit board, but maybe there's one or two people that are a couple of years younger than me. But I would say that most people at this point, the tide has changed in a lot of these spaces to view youth and to kind of have this social justice view of why youth should be on boards. And I think that the attitudes have changed significantly towards that in the past few years. I would say that when it comes to a for-profit board, the reason that you have a really high average age is just due to the experience that is needed within that. So when you look at the people who are on a lot of for-profit boards, they're usually chief executives of other companies within the same industry. So it's really, especially in the larger organizations. But that doesn't mean that you can't interact with that board and influence that board and throughout your work as well. And in that regard, I haven't faced adversity there either, because I've been really fortunate that the boards that I've worked with have been very supportive of environmental justice throughout generations, as well as social justice throughout generations. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, don't go into it too nervous, because in a lot of these spaces, people are really open to hear your ideas and your thoughts.
I agree with that. It's very intimidating. But when I did go into the Albuquerque Energy Council, I am the youngest one by a lot there. But I think the fact that I had the knowledge that, like, the mayor chose me, I was like, okay, well, there's a reason I'm here. And if you're in a board, there's a reason that you're there. It's that you're qualified as a young individual, and you should, kind of run with it and be like, I'm supposed to be here. There's a reason I'm here. And if you do face adversity, just remember that.
Any other questions? Oh, Sophia, you have a hand up.
Hi. Okay, so hi again. My name is Sophia. I am the fellow for youth engagement this summer. And my question is, so I actually served on a board when I was in early high school, the Girl Scouts of Eastern Missouri. But I found that I didn't always feel like I was the most effective person when it came to like asking that things, really speaking up during the meetings. They talk about all this financial information, stuff that I didn't fully understand. So when it comes to moments like that where you might just be a little bit out of your depth, even though you know you belong there, what do you do? How do you go about building up your confidence? I know you guys talk about research. How do you just go about the research and also reaching out to other people on the board for help?
I would say that's where doing your homework ahead of time comes into play. As the board member, you should feel confident that you can answer any questions related to anything that's on the agenda. And you could do your research ahead of time. And that gets back to my asking questions as well, is that if you get the agenda ahead of time and you don't understand something, go talk to the executive director go talk to whoever is sending out the agenda. And I have never asked a question and had somebody laugh at me or tell me it's a silly question or anything like that. So people are always willing to talk to you about what things mean, or even a lot of the times you'll ask these questions and they'll be like, oh, you're not the only one that's not clear for, or, if it's something related to the financial, maybe they'll give you a little crash course in what they're talking about. But I would say that, that advanced preparation is really important so that you can ask the questions ahead of time too, so that you can meet with whoever you need to meet with to answer your questions ahead of time. Of course, if you have questions as they arise during meetings, then I think it's hard sometimes to speak up, and I would acknowledge that it's hard to speak up, but it doesn't mean you can't have your voice heard in the next meeting, because nothing happens quickly on boards. So take a little note of whatever your question was. Talk to whoever you think is most relevant to answer that question, whether it's the executive director, whether it's somebody else on the board. And then next time when you're reviewing the meeting minutes from the previous meeting, you can speak up and say, hey, related to that, I had this point from last week that I thought of after we talked, or something like that. And so there's always nothing moves quickly on any board or in the world ever, it seems sometimes, in sustainability. And so don't be afraid to sit back and think, if you don't have the question right away, ask the questions and bring it up at the next meeting.
Definitely agree with that. I think when I first started, there's so much history that you're not going to know of. And that's the hardest part, is trying to catch up. So like I was like, wow, I don't know anything. But once I was like, okay, I don't want to feel this way anymore, I reached out to people to figure out, what am I missing? What is the background that I need to know in order to be successful in this board? And I would say reaching out to people, no one's going to be like, oh, I don't want to help you. People are always willing to help, and doing your homework by studying as much as you can and feeling prepared at that next meeting is really important. But at the end of the day, you're not going to know everything every single meeting. It's going to take years. And that's just where questions come up. So just be utilizing questions as much as possible.
That was another great question. And I'm so excited about this meeting because it's given me so many, I'm like typing out things to think about, for instance, for board readiness. What sort of onboarding would be an expectation for a board to get folks feeling comfortable to, understand the history, the background, the financials, to know like how to address an issue if an issue arises, like Max was talking about. So you all have helped me so much. And Angie has a hand up. Yes.
Yeah, I have a quick question related to what we're discussing right now. And I know, Samantha, you said it takes years to kind of get to know more of the history and feel comfortable with that. But I'm just wondering how long it took each of you to feel comfortable and confident in your positions on the board.
For me, I'm still learning. There's still so much I need to learn. So I feel comfortable, with the board. I know the people, but I'm still learning to this day. And yeah, that's just kind of the reality of it.
Yeah, I would say I'm still learning too. I would say that I've been comfortable with the board for a long time. I'm learning something new every day, but I think that once you accept that everyone's learning something new every day, then it's a lot easier to feel comfortable right away. And so I consider a lot of the people who I'm on boards with now as, they're people who I would reach out to if, I had a question related to their business or anything like that. And so it doesn't feel like there's a separation between and there's no hierarchy on a board. And so there's no, like, you might look at it and say this person has more experience than me, but you're all board members. There's no hierarchy. And so I think that really helps a lot as well. But I think, I don't know, meeting 2 or 3, if you're asking questions and connecting with people before and after the meeting, you might find that they're not so scary.
If Sam and Lydia are okay with it, I was going to send a follow-up email, and I can send like their LinkedIn, or some way to stay connected. So if you have questions, and you can always reach out to me as well if you have questions about Youth on Board. So I know we had some people that joined us that weren't here for the introduction. I'll just reiterate. Next steps are I'm going to follow up in an email with everyone who signed up for the webinar. And I'll just say, if you are interested in learning more and potentially being matched as a board placement in the future, then just reply yes to this and I'll get you on our interest list. We have 2 professional development sessions coming this fall. September is going to be board basics. So that question you all are asking, like, what do I bare bones need to know about board governance before I would start on a board? And then the one in October is going to be how to understand the financials of an organization, how to read a financial report, and understand that the role the board plays in things like approving a budget or how an organization creates a budget. So we'll decide the dates on that based on that interest list. If you say yes, then I'll reach out and say, hey, what days work for you? So be sure to respond to me if you hear from me, if you're interested in that. And you can always follow up with me privately by email if you have any questions. So I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Lydia and Sam. It was a great session. Thank you, audience, for your questions and your engagement. I appreciate you all being here. And we are right at the hour. So I'll wrap up and I will hear from everyone soon. Bye.